Something does not add up. You have met people who seem completely normal on the surface. They hold jobs, they maintain relationships, they speak with confidence. But something about how they think feels off. Something about their decisions feels broken. And the more you watch them, the more a pattern emerges that cannot be unseen. Niccolò Machiavelli documented this pattern 5 centuries ago. He called it the psychology of the weak mind. And he warned that weak minds are not born. They are built, habit by habit, decision by decision, day by day. Tonight you are going to see exactly how. And once you see these habits, you will never be able to unsee them. Stay until the last habit, because that one is the most dangerous. And it is the one most people refuse to acknowledge about themselves. The official story about intelligence says it is fixed. You are either born smart, or you are not. But that story does not add up. Because the research tells a completely different version, and it changes everything about how you see yourself and the people around you. Machiavelli observed that intelligence is not primarily a gift, it is a discipline. And weak minds are not stupid minds, they are undisciplined minds. Minds that have developed specific habits that slowly erode their capacity to think clearly, reason accurately, and respond to reality with strength. These habits feel comfortable, they feel normal, some of them even feel virtuous, but they are quietly exposing weakness to everyone watching. There is one piece of this puzzle that most people never explain. Not in schools, not in self-help books, not in motivational content. The habits that expose a weak mind are not the obvious ones. They are the invisible ones, the ones that look like personality, the ones that masquerade as values. We will come back to that. First, you need to see exactly what these habits look like in real life. The first habit is reacting before thinking, every single time. Watch someone carefully in a moment of mild pressure. Their boss sends a critical email. Their partner says something they did not like. A stranger disagrees with them publicly. The weak mind reacts immediately, without pause, without processing, without asking whether the reaction serves them. The response is automatic, emotional, unfiltered. It feels honest to them. It feels authentic. But here is the problem. Authenticity without discipline is just impulsiveness with better marketing. Machiavelli wrote that the man who cannot govern his reactions cannot govern anything else, and he was right. Every relationship this person damages, every opportunity they destroy, every bridge they burn happens in the gap between stimulus and response. A gap they never learned to use. Strong minds pause. They process. They choose their response strategically. Weak minds react and then spend weeks managing the consequences of 3 seconds of impulsive behavior. Think about someone you know who does this. The colleague who fires back a defensive email the moment they receive criticism. The friend who says exactly what they feel in the worst possible moment. The family member who cannot let a single provocation pass without responding. You have watched them create the same problems repeatedly, and you have watched them blame the situations instead of the habit. That pattern is not bad luck. That is a weak mind operating exactly as trained. The second habit is needing the last word. Every argument, every disagreement, every conversation that does not go their way, they cannot let it end without speaking last. This seems small. It is not small. It is the clearest possible signal of insecure thinking. Machiavelli observed that the prince who felt compelled to answer every critic was already diminished by the critics, because needing the last word reveals that the other person's opinion still holds power over you. It reveals that silence feels like losing. And it reveals that your sense of being right depends on their acknowledgement rather than on the actual truth of your position. Strong minds walk away from unwinnable conversations without feeling diminished. They understand that the most powerful response is often no response at all. But the weak mind cannot tolerate the ambiguity of an unfinished argument. They chase the last word like it is oxygen. And every time they do, they hand power to the person they were arguing with. 3 people witnessed this habit destroy a man's career in a single afternoon. 1 critical comment from a colleague in a meeting. 1 defensive response. 1 escalation. 1 final cutting remark that he simply had to deliver. And 20 years of professional reputation collapsed because he could not let someone else have the last word. The cameras were working. Everyone saw exactly who he was in that moment. And what they saw exposed a weakness he had been hiding for decades. The third habit is the most dangerous. More dangerous than the first two combined. And most people reading this right now are doing it without knowing it. It is the habit of seeking validation before acting. Every decision requires external confirmation. Every plan needs to be approved by someone before it feels safe to execute. Every idea must be presented to others and validated before the weak mind believes it is worth pursuing. This sounds like humility. It is not humility. This is where it gets dangerous. Real humility seeks feedback to improve thinking. Validation seeking seeks approval to replace thinking. The person who cannot act without someone telling them they are right has outsourced their judgment entirely. They have handed the controls of their own mind to whoever they are seeking approval from. And whoever controls the approval controls the person. Machiavelli saw advisors exploit this habit in princes to gain enormous power, make the prince feel uncertain, become the source of validation, and the prince will ask your opinion before every decision. The habit that feels like humility becomes the mechanism of your own manipulation. In relationships, this looks like the partner who cannot make a single decision without checking with the other person first. Not because they value collaboration, but because uncertainty is unbearable and someone else's confidence temporarily relieves it. In the workplace, this looks like the employee who sends their work to 5 different people for approval before submitting anything, not because they want feedback, but because being wrong alone feels more threatening than being wrong together. This habit stunts development. Every time you seek validation instead of trusting your own assessment, you fail to build the judgment muscle that comes from making decisions and living with their outcomes. The weak mind that requires constant validation becomes progressively less capable of independent thought, until eventually they cannot think without permission. The fourth habit is confusing comfort with safety. This is where it stops being merely a personal weakness and starts becoming genuinely dangerous to everyone around them. The weak mind avoids discomfort with the same urgency that a healthy mind avoids actual danger. A difficult conversation feels like a threat. Challenging feedback feels like an attack. New environments feel like emergencies. The body responds with stress. The mind categorizes the situation as dangerous, and the person retreats, avoids, or attacks to remove the discomfort as quickly as possible. But here is what that case file reveals. Every piece of growth requires discomfort. Every new capability requires the discomfort of incompetence first. Every honest relationship requires the discomfort of difficult conversations. Every meaningful achievement requires the sustained discomfort of sustained effort. The person who treats discomfort as danger is a person who has locked themselves inside a prison with no visible walls. They wonder why they are not growing. They wonder why their relationships stay shallow. They wonder why others seem to advance while they remain stationary. The answer is in the habit. They retreat every time the path forward requires passing through discomfort. And retreating feels safe. But retreating is the mechanism of their own stagnation. For years, this habit goes unnoticed. The person appears functional, stable even. Then a moment arrives that demands real courage. A genuine challenge appears that cannot be avoided. And suddenly the years of choosing comfort over growth are exposed in a single moment of catastrophic unpreparedness. That box found in the storage unit, that hidden evidence, it reveals everything that was being avoided all along. The fifth habit is performing intelligence instead of developing it. This one is devastating, and it is everywhere. The weak mind spends enormous energy appearing smart, using complex vocabulary to describe simple ideas, dropping references to books they have not actually read, speaking confidently about subjects they have not actually studied, agreeing with the most credentialed person in the room rather than forming their own view. This performance takes time and energy that could be directed toward actual learning. But actual learning requires admitting ignorance first, and admitting ignorance destroys the performance. So the weak mind chooses the performance over the development. They choose looking intelligent over becoming intelligent. and the gap between appearance and reality grows wider year by year. That fingerprint should have closed the case. The performance should have maintained the illusion. Instead, it opened something worse, because the weak mind that has spent years performing intelligence cannot function when placed in situations that require actual competence. The performance collapses, the reality is exposed, and everyone who was watching the performance closely realizes they saw the truth much earlier but chose to ignore it. Machiavelli called this the courtier's trap. Surrounding yourself with your own performance until you can no longer distinguish between what you actually know and what you have only pretended to know. The prince who fell for this and his advisors lost his court. The person who falls for this in themselves loses their potential. The sixth habit is using emotion as evidence. This is the habit that makes weak minds genuinely dangerous in positions of influence. They feel something strongly and interpret that feeling as proof that something is true. They are angry, therefore they have been wronged. They are afraid, therefore there is a real threat. They are certain, therefore they are correct. The intensity of the emotion substitutes for actual verification of the belief. Machiavelli was precise about this. He wrote that a leader who governs by feeling governs by chaos, because feelings change. Feelings are influenced by hunger, sleep, environment, and social pressure. A decision made from strong emotion today looks completely different when the emotion has passed. But the consequences of that decision do not change with the feeling that produced them. In your relationships, this looks like the person who makes life-altering decisions based on how they feel in a single conversation. In your workplace, this looks like the manager who sets policy based on one incident that upset them, rather than on actual patterns of behavior. In politics, this looks like leaders who pursue disastrous strategies because retreating would feel like weakness. Emotion as evidence creates a mind that is completely ungovernable by reality, because reality cannot compete with the certainty of a strong feeling, and the weak mind has never developed any mechanism for checking feelings against facts. The seventh habit, the one nobody wants to hear, is refusing to be wrong, not simply struggling to admit mistakes. Refusing, structuring your entire life to avoid situations where being wrong becomes unavoidable. Choosing relationships where you are always the most informed person. Avoiding conversations that challenge your existing beliefs. Surrounding yourself with information that confirms what you already think. Dismissing anyone who presents evidence that contradicts your current worldview. This habit starts small. It feels like confidence. It feels like having standards. But here is the disturbing truth that this investigation ultimately reveals. The person who cannot be wrong cannot learn. The person who cannot learn cannot adapt. The person who cannot adapt will eventually be destroyed by a reality that does not adjust to accommodate their certainty. Machiavelli wrote that the prince who believes himself infallible has already signed his own death warrant. Because reality has infinite patience, it will wait, and when it arrives, it will not negotiate. The case is officially closed on the comfortable version of this story. But the truth is more disturbing. These 7 habits are not rare. They are not confined to obviously weak people. They exist in fragments in almost every mind that has not been deliberately trained to resist them. The reactive response, the need for the last word, the validation seeking, the comfort addiction, the performance of intelligence, the emotion as evidence, the refusal to be wrong. Each one feels natural, each one feels justified. Each one quietly exposes the architecture of a mind that has chosen comfort over growth, appearance over reality, and feeling over truth. If you recognize these habits in someone around you, you now have a map of exactly how they will behave under pressure. If you recognize these habits in yourself, you have something more valuable than a map. You have a warning. Machiavelli did not write about weak minds to mock them. He wrote about them to show powerful minds what to guard against. Because the strongest version of you is not built by avoiding weakness. It is built by seeing weakness clearly and choosing differently, every single day, starting now.